What's up, Cycling Fanatics? Welcome to the very first live stream of the 2021 football season. Matt Van Winkle, Chris Williams down in Dallas. Chris, how's it going, man?
Good. It's good to be talking football, man. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
it's weird that you say it's the first one of the season, but you're right.
It is. It is.
July 14th. Let's go. Camp is in
Man.
like 2 weeks. Let's get after it, man.
Crazy. We were just talking before we started here, man. Like, we didn't have one of these Big 12 media days last year. Obviously, these were all done via Zoom, and we're still doing it kind of a virtual way today with you being down in Dallas. But man, technology is a pretty awesome thing to be able to do these, and we're gonna do a lot more of these throughout the season, like we did last year. Keep you guys as in tune as we can. But we wanted to get your perspective down in Dallas from the first day of Big 12 Media Days. Iowa State was the very first team up on the podium. Coach Campbell down there with Greg Eisworth, Breece Hall as well. Want to just get your takes from the first day, Chris. What were some of your biggest takeaways, other than what we found out about Charlie Kohler eating his spaghetti with his hands? Apparently, that's been debunked.
He's debunked that. Yeah, Charlie debunked that on Twitter.
No, what are your biggest takeaways? Obviously, the Campbell stuff, the Campbell quote about him staying in Ames, that seemed to be kind of the biggest takeaway from the day for me, at least.
Kind of caught me off guard. I guess I wasn't. I talked a little bit about this on KXNO. Maybe I was naive, Matt, but I didn't expect that to be a story today. You know, I just I didn't see the point. I mean, like, I get that these national guys and the regional guys are probably going to ask that, but I don't know. You got a top 10 team, like they were in the Big 12 championship a year ago. Yeah, we all know Matt turned down a lot of money from the NFL in the offseason.
Right?
Is that a story on July 14th? I guess I don't think it is. But Campbell, to his credit, I think handled it marvelously. You know,
and if people are just joining us too and haven't heard the clip, let's just play that, Chris, if you don't mind. Yeah, let's get that queued up.
What I love about football is to teach. What I love about football is to coach. And, what I love about, creating a culture where young people feel confident and safe to show up every day and work to become the best version of themselves, where coaches get to show up every day and work to become the best version of themselves. That's what I love. And I think we've worked really hard to create a culture that allows that growth to happen within our walls. And really that's what I love about the sport, and that's really what I love about what I get to do day in and day out.
I don't know if that was that the exact quote. I don't think that was it. Was it?
Well, I mean, that
you get the idea. I mean, he basically
that was when the guy from Texas stood up and asked him basically why are you still in Ames? That's the one that popped for everybody right there. But no,
so I didn't get into this profession to be somebody. I got in this profession to do something. I think that's kind of the quote that stood out the most from his presser today. He's not going to give too much away, but that was kind of the biggest takeaway.
I would agree. He knocked it out of the park there. I mean, the thing is it actually might be advantageous for Iowa State that those questions were asked, because Campbell was able to get out in front of it and address it. And if you're a recruit, you get to watch that little clip that you just played, and that'll shut up a lot of negative things up on the recruiting trail. So, yeah, I mean, that was a story. Again, I wasn't prepared for it to be. The other thing I wasn't prepared for was Bob Bowlesby and all the talk about COVID and this Delta variant. I guess, again, naive, country bumpkin from Southwest Iowa. I kind of thought we were getting this COVID thing beat. I mean, I've obviously read about this Delta variant, but it does sound like if there's going to be protocols that are going to have to be put in place for unvaccinated players, and that this whole COVID thing could still be a storyline. I mean, it's obviously not going to be what it was last year, but I did find it telling, Matt, that Bob Bowlesby talked about it for the first 10 minutes of his press conference. There's a lot of other things you could leave with today, and he was clearly trying to make a point that they're out in front of this.
Yeah, for sure. And to his credit, I mean, like you said, getting out in front of it, I think you almost have to address it, just because of the fact that, for sure, you didn't have one of these last year, right? It's kind of the elephant in the room that we're all back here. Nobody, I don't know, did you guys have to wear masks inside? I don't think you did. It was more of a socially distanced Big 12 media days. But with that many people getting back into stadiums, like you talk about the players' perspective, right? The safety of the players. You're also talking about, 50, 60, 70,000 fans getting into these stadiums. So we obviously know with this Delta variant, there's a lot of unknown about it, but I think it's smart of him to get out there and at least address it, because there are going to be concerned fans out there. I mean, a lot of people, like you said, like yourself, aren't as concerned about COVID at this point, but it's still a national topic. It's still out there. There are still positive cases all around the country. So for him to get out and talk about that obviously means that it's at the forefront.
Like I say, I was just surprised from it.
Yeah.
But whatever. I don't think it's going. We're not in a spot that we're not fear mongering here. There's going to be a
and you asked Campbell about that directly. Is COVID on your mind at all? And he said no. We're moving on from that. So it's obviously not a concern to the Iowa State football team, and they're ready to kind of move on and think about football. So
yeah, and basically, I mean, Bowlesby's whole deal, I think, was a push by the conference too for vaccinations. That's kind of how I took it too, from him leading off with that the way he did. I have a couple of things too here, Matt, on just for the nitty gritty fans out there. I thought a couple of notes that were interesting. Breece Hall told me that he's put on 10 pounds, which is, he told me he's put on 10 pounds and then his 40 time has dropped. So that's like scary if Breece is even better. Greg Eisworth told me the same thing. He's put on 10 pounds in the offseason. My whole deal, like what I draw from that is that those two guys, we all know that they work really hard and yada, yada, yada. But if you got two guys that are putting on that kind of weight, I think that, you have a full off season with this Dave Andrews, the new strength and conditioning coordinator. I think that could bode really well for Iowa State coming up here in just a couple of months, especially, it is kind of one of the things, if you want to pick apart the program and be critical where you can, it's how Iowa State has performed in the month of September. And I'm excited. I really do think that this Dave Andrews is top 5 to 10 strength coaches in the country. And that type of weight gain from those two guys and speed gain by a guy who was already really fast in Breece Hall, so that's a really, really big deal. And that's a great sign for Iowa State going into the season.
Well, the other side of it too, Chris, is that when you put on that kind of weight and that kind of muscle, you're talking about fewer injuries going into the season and throughout the season. I mean, that is, you've talked about this throughout, the last couple of months, is one of the biggest things of last season was the ability to stay healthy. I mean, you had a few guys, Milton obviously had, early on the season goes down, and you had a couple key guys get injured, but for the most part, you stayed healthy, COVID wise and, injury wise on the field. So that's going to be a big thing moving forward, and something that is going to be crucial as you talked about, starting the season off strong. You don't want to have that slump going, in non-conference games. You have a fairly light schedule. I mean, with Northern Iowa, you can't ever sleep on UNLV, and then obviously the big game against Iowa at home. That's going to be, I don't know if that was talked about at all today with Campbell. I think probably
not really. I guess that really didn't get brought up at all, but
there's time for that still.
Thing did though. I view the September thing. I mean, that's basically an indictment on the Iowa game. If you win the Iowa game, nobody's going to be critical of September because you're probably going to beat Northern Iowa and UNLV.
Right.
God, Northern Iowa still terrifies the hell out of me.
And it's still one of the biggest humps for Campbell too. I mean, you talk about a guy that's accomplished. You talk about a guy that's accomplished a lot over the past 3 years. You got to beat Iowa. You got to get through it. You got to go undefeated in the non-conference if you want to talk about a college football playoff opportunity.
In September, they could go 3-1 in September with road wins in Vegas, in Waco, and then beat Northern Iowa at home. But if they lose to Iowa and go 3-1 in September, it's seen as a total failure.
Yeah,
they have to beat Iowa. Like you're a top 10 team. You get them at home. You've got to beat Iowa.
Fair, but the other side would say that game doesn't matter if you go undefeated in the non-conference, right? So I mean, I know what you're saying. Again,
I'm looking to.
But the common fan. I know. Yeah, the common fan, especially going into this season as a top 10 team, that's a must-win game.
Absolutely. I mean, here's the other thing I hate about it. Like, why do we as fans, Matt, why do we have to act like the game's not important? We all care about it. We all want to beat them. Like everybody feels that way. Like when at this point in this rivalry did it become cool to be like, oh, we don't care about you?
Well, especially when you
absolutely care.
Especially when you didn't play the game last year, and the way the game ended in Ames the last 2 years ago.
Everybody cares. They care. Iowa State fans care. The coaches care. The players care. I mean, why? That whole deal is just so weird to me. You think Auburn and Alabama are over there like, oh, well, you care about it more than we do. Oh, they hate each other. It's okay.
Yeah. Couple other notes that stood out to you, Chris. I know. You've had a long day, man. So props to Chris, man. He's down there by himself churning out all this content. Great stuff at cyclingfanatic.com. You've had podcasts go up. You've had videos on social media, and the website is full of new stuff. So big props to you, Chris.
About a 2,500 word column I'll be posting here when we get done. And then I did a premium only insider column for our premium and Patreon members. Y'all can check that out. Or if you really want to, you should subscribe, because that's the number one thing you can do to help us at cyclingfanatic.com.
We also want to thank
keeps all the free content flowing too.
That's right. We forgot to mention, we want to thank our sponsors for Big 12 Media Day coverage, the Iowa Clinic, the Iowa Clinic Men's Center. Thanks to them for their longtime support of Cycling Fanatic and sending Chris all the way down there to Dallas.
Okay, let me go through the rest of my little notebook here. I thought Gary Patterson was great. I wrote a lot about this. Gary Patterson brought up, in my opinion, which is one of the biggest things with this name, image, and likeness thing that nobody's talking about, is there's got to be, Matt, some player representation at some point. There's got to be some sort of a player union. He was kind of talking about how right now, with the transfer portal, with the name, image, likeness thing, I mean, it really is the Wild West out there. All these different states view it differently. All these institutions view it differently. It's freaking crazy. So we've got to have more, and it's still new. They will. I thought Gary Patterson knocked it out of the park. I thought that a really good point was brought up, and listen to this one. We all watched a lot of really bad football last year, and I don't really blame them, because these guys didn't really have an off season, and half the teams were COVID-ridden the whole year. You didn't know who was going to play on a week-to-week basis. Now you've got all these guys that are back. These super seniors is what we're calling them.
Right.
This will be the oldest that college football has ever looked because of all these guys who are back. Chris Kleiman, the head coach at Kansas State, was talking about that, how he thinks that this could be one of the best, as far as just the product on the field, the most crisply paid football season maybe in the history of college football. I had not thought about it that way, but that really makes a lot of sense. And Iowa State falls right into it. We're like, hey, this is our best team ever. Well, you're getting all these guys back who probably would have gone pro. They would have had
and especially when
wouldn't be back, right?
And especially when you consider the schedule last year was shorter. They didn't play as many games, right? You're not putting as many miles on the tread there for these guys. So that's a great point by, was it Coach Patterson that brought that up?
Coach Kleiman over at Kansas State.
K-State.
Said that, yeah.
Interesting.
And then Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley goes up on the stand and basically calls AT&T Stadium their home, their second home. I mean, he's walking around. I mean, he was the cock of the walk today down, and rightfully so. I mean, if Oklahoma would go to a playoff, that'd be 4 in 5 years. They've won 6 Big 12 championships in a row. He's got the front runner to win the Heisman Trophy. I talked to Breece about the Heisman, by the way. He gave some good stuff. He basically called it a quarterback's award. He's like, yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle. And he's right. I went and did the math. Since the year 2000, 17 Heisman trophies have gone to quarterbacks.
So one of those would have been to a running back, Reggie Bush, right?
Yeah, Reggie Bush, Derrick Henry, Devontae Smith last year, and then there was another one in there somewhere. So, anyways, that I personally care about these individual awards. If Iowa State could win a Heisman Trophy, do you realize how big of a deal that would be? You know what I mean? It would be – it would be monumental. So we'll see. I did a little more digging too. It sounds like the kicking situation is looking up with this grad transfer, Matt, this Mevis kid who came in from the FCS game. So that was a piece of this puzzle where you kind of look at like, well, where can they improve on from last year? The kicking game was definitely it. So things looking up in that. But again, it's July 14th. I've learned my lesson over the years to not get too excited about any particular Iowa State kicker.
Yeah, for sure. We'll wait till the first game to see what happens.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll see what happens on the field. Chris, one thing that stood out to me from it was kind of your media scrum with Hines and Randy. You asked Coach Campbell about being hunter versus the hunted, right? Iowa State kind of flipping the script in the last couple of years, and if that changes anything, kind of going into a season with all the high expectation. He said he kind of laughed, but I thought it was a good question because Iowa State has never, and maybe it wasn't asked the right way, or maybe he didn't take it the right way, but I know what you're saying is that Iowa State has never been a top 10 team going into a season, right? I think the point you were trying to make is you guys are at the highest pedestal you've ever been, right? Does that change anything?
Yeah, well, that's me. Like, I mean, his response was, well, we've been good for a while now, and he's right.
Right, yes.
But you haven't been, like, top 10 good where –
and you haven't been the national conversation, right, in this light.
And, like, never has Iowa State been ever. Or maybe after the run, the Seneca teams or the Troy Davis where you're wanting to see one guy. Iowa State has never been a team where opposing fans will circle that date and want to get to that game to go watch Iowa State play.
And you could argue not even going into last season, right? I mean,
no,
I
don't think so.
You go down to Norman, you beat Oklahoma, you kind of get on the national spotlight, things start to take an upward trajectory. From there, you get more on the national spotlight. But I think the question was fair to him to say that, you guys have never been this highly regarded and kind of teams are circling you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that makes like Kansas's long streak in basketball so impressive. Like, because every game when Kansas would go on the road in the Big 12, they would get the craziest crowd of the year. I mean, we've seen it names. When I was in college, we would have raffles, for the Iowa and the Kansas games. It's like when Iowa and Iowa State used to go into Drake and Northern Iowa. Like that. I mean, that's the only game that half of those students will even go to all year, and they're freaking crazy. Makes them really difficult. And I mean, no, that won't be Iowa State this year. But you're damn right. Like these other teams, they punked a lot of teams last year too. You think Kansas State's not going to be wanting to play Iowa State this year, or Texas Tech, like the way that those teams were just embarrassed in Ames and West Virginia? West Virginia is not going to want to circle that date on October 30th? They're going to get the best shot.
For sure. And let's not forget the fact that there's going to be fans in the stands this year, right? That's going to make those road games even more difficult.
No doubt. And that's a neutralizer. I mean, you look at ways where how does Iowa State not live up to their expectations? There's a lot of those things that come into play. Everything's more difficult this year. So
for sure.
Yeah, regardless, I mean, it was definitely a fun day though, man. It's just good to be a little bit normal. And I'm excited for fall camp to get coming up here, and we'll have coverage for you guys. We'll knock it out of the park, I promise.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff already up on cyclefanatic.com. Chris has got podcasts up on the podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. Already listened to the one with you and Campbell and Eisworth. So did you do anything? Did you get to talk to Breece at all?
Yeah, I did. I just haven't got it put up yet. I did a one-on-one with Breece. And
cool.
I'll probably put that up tomorrow morning to space things out just a little bit. But, yep, that'll be up there.
And will you stick around tomorrow for any other teams, or are you gonna?
Yeah, I'll stay for the whole event. I like tomorrow. The biggest value of coming down to these things is not the press conferences. It's just walking around and rubbing elbows with people, and that's how you get good information. So, the hotel bar is really the key. That's when people have loose lips and they like to talk.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you coming on and giving us some insight from Dallas as well. We'll do more of these, as we said, throughout the season.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we'll be right here to give you a full coverage of Iowa State. Top 10 team, Chris, just weeks away.
Still weird, but I'll take it. Let's go. Let's roll with it, baby.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate your time. Stick around, cyclingfanatic.com. A lot more coverage coming your way. Appreciate it. See you, Chris.
Later, man.